Hello, everyone. It's Lindsay Landry, and we are here for another Make a Splash conversation. And today I am so delighted to have one of my soul sisters and my dear friends. And she is a freaking badass healer and coach. And I'm just so excited to be talking with her today, my friend Michelle Wolff. So, hello, Michelle.
Hi, thank you. Now I'll have to blush for a minute and then get myself together.
Do your blushing.
Yeah. Oh, and same. It's so fun to talk to you. I was just thinking this morning that it's been a while since we did this, and I like it.
Totally.
So, yeah. So if people haven't worked with me before, the best way to get information is just find me on Facebook, facebook.com/MichelleWolff11, or go to the website, which is thatmichellewolff.com. But in a nutshell, I've taken years of being a social worker and a therapist and turned that into a coaching practice, and have found it to be my mission to bring information forward that's not always comfortable. Certainly it's not always comfortable for me. And I wouldn't say that my clients get a comfortable process either, but they do get a process that frees them. And freedom is my most important value. So it's the underpinning for everything that I do.
Yes, I love that you brought up the uncomfortableness and the uncomfortable conversations, because my whole intention around this Make a Splash series this year was really to hold space for these uncomfortable conversations, right? Because I think that especially the conversation we're going to be going in today, there's a way, we can use Facebook and social media and what's going on. We can show maybe one side of ourselves. And I know, for my community, I have a lot of entrepreneurs who are wanting to grow their business, or healers who are wanting to grow and expand their business. And, sometimes when we are just seeing all of the positive or all of the shininess, there's so much more happening underneath that and behind the scenes. And there's conversations that need to be had about this, right?
Yes. Exactly. I really believe it's contributing to, not that we don't have enough to be depressed about, but I think it contributes to this compare and despair, daily comparison leading to despair. Because
Totally.
I think, especially for younger people who didn't have a lot of adult years without social media, I don't know that they quite understand that it literally is just a slice of a life. It's not at all the totality of it. And I think that's leading to a great deal of loneliness and disconnect.
Definitely. And so for those of you listening, Michelle is freaking amazing. And she is a multi-talented, multi-hat, multi-passionate person. So there's so many different conversations, we could bring this into. And there's plenty on YouTube that I've already had with her as well. But today we're really going to be talking about collective healing, world healing, and also staying in your process when we have a lot happening outside of us. So whether that's social media, whether that's things happening in the world, or maybe it's even just things happening in your own world, right? In your immediate family, or with your children, or whatever that might look like for you. So I think this is such an important topic, and I'm super excited to dive into it.
Yes, I agree.
So where do you want to start?
I was just thinking, these are not the conversations that make you popular at parties. That's for sure. I think so when you work with people, you notice that there's themes, like your business of working with people. People show up on your doorstep all carrying a theme, and those themes kind of go in waves. And the theme that has been showing up among my community lately has been getting lost in what you said earlier about your own process and the world process, and really struggling to tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
What's mine? What's the world's? If you're an empath or an introvert or a sensitive person, it's going to hit you harder. And when you start to go through your own process of grieving, you're vulnerable to also slipstreaming into the world's grieving.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I describe that is I see energy as a giant river, and everybody has a current in that river, and emotions are currents in that river that just have a different temperature or sensation in the body. And our challenge is to know what's our current, what's the whole river's current, what's the current of this emotion or that emotion. And it's a challenge, but it's a good one. Somebody asked, how do I tell the difference between what's mine and what's the world's? And that is tricky. There's a couple of things you can do to evaluate. The bottom line of it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's an intense emotion, and if you're feeling it, it's important to name it and to breathe, really anchor in your breath, to breathe yourself through it.
Totally.
Not I was saying this morning on a Facebook Live, like, it's not to, okay, I'm going to breathe so I can jump over to the other side. I'm going to breathe so I can train myself to handle intense energies, because they're all just energy. We strip the labels away.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not trained to handle intense energy. So bottom line, it doesn't really matter if it's yours or the world's. And also, sometimes we just can't handle taking on the intensity of the whole world. And that level of intensity for me is the indicator of when I know that I'm not just processing my own. My own stuff can feel overwhelming, but
Mm-hmm.
when I've also tapped into the global collective grief or whatever it is, there's a heaviness. So people describe that as having the weight of the world on their shoulders. Literally true, the weight of the whole world.
Totally. And so I just want to name a few things so that people can have some physical references.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can just name like the suicides that happened last week as
Yes.
like one
Yeah.
thing that happened, right? And then now,
Yeah.
for those who are on social media, there's so much conversation about it on social media. So,
Yeah.
that could affect people in so many different ways. Like, I know for myself, I was feeling so angry and fiery about it.
Yeah.
And I know lots of other people that were grieving.
Yes.
And yeah, so I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Well, if we're awake and aware, and we've, done some regular kind of daily practice, or at least know ourselves to some degree, then we know what home base of our energy feels like. So then we can tell if if we were feeling a certain, let's say we were feeling at a 5, between 1 and 10, we're feeling kind of neutral. Then we go on social media and we end up raging or devastated. Then we know that we've slipped out of ourselves and we've picked up what's activated out there.
Mm-hmm.
But the particular thing that gets activated in us is still a message for us. So some of us will be triggered into anger because anger is what needs to move through us.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us will be triggered into grief because we need to move through grief. So the challenge and the opportunity is to stay with it as long as you can, and to recognize that it's not just you.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't just you, because you weren't feeling that way before you went on to Facebook, and then you immediately, or within just a few minutes, you find yourself caught up in a strong emotion that's been triggered by the social media. Then you know that you're in your stuff, and you still have to stay. Well, you don't have to, but it benefits you to go ahead and start asking questions. Okay, wait a minute. Is this mine? And
Mm-hmm.
if it's mine, am I in a space where I can process it right now? Or is this something that the whole world is going through, and I in a place where I can add some breathing into this space right now, or do I need to just shut the computer down and practice extreme mindfulness and just be washing the dishes right now? You have to
Totally.
ask those questions and judge for yourself. I think too often we're taking the victim approach, like, oh, well, I got hit by this stuff and now I have to do a thing with it. You don't.
Right.
You get to decide. Go ahead.
So a thing that's coming forward for me that feels like also an important conversation to have around this is, let's see if I can find the words.
Okay.
Okay, so the way when we get uncomfortable, so say there are a lot of people grieving, right? So whether it's over
Yes.
the suicides or whether it's the fires or
The
whether
children. The
it's
children are wrecking people right and left.
all these different things that are happening, right? So
Yeah.
then people go into grief. And then, so if we're not comfortable being with grief, right? So if we're
Yeah.
not comfortable being with our own grief, do you want to talk a little bit about like how that might start to come forward? Maybe creating like the separation, and also what can someone do? Because I know that, you know, in the past, this is something where I've struggled with, where maybe I wasn't comfortable with anger, right? Or rage.
Right.
So when
Yeah.
people would go into like the activist mode where they're like wanting to do something, or
Yes.
I
Hmm.
would get totally kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to be part of this conversation. You know, like, let me
Right.
run and hide.
Yes. Yeah. So we tend to want to jump into action when we want to make the thing that's triggering us stop. Like, I don't want you to cry if I'm not comfortable with my grief, because then you're going to trigger my stuff, and I'd rather just you knock it off.
Mm-hmm.
you know, or I'll go into anger as a protection from grief. Like, what there's heavy duty grieving going on, then I might slip into anger or addiction in order to step away from that feeling. And I'm missing then an opportunity to process what needs to come forward in me. Um,
And
we
so
can
that
use,
addiction,
yeah,
do you want to just give some physical examples of what that might look like, or even the running
yes,
away, what that might look like?
yeah, it's so funny how divine timing is. I was just talking about this morning in a different group. Um, so what it looks like is you feel a wave of emotion and you may jump into activist mode. Like, I'm going to share a post and I'm going to write a rant. I'm very prone to this one. I'm going to get fired up and I'm going to say a bunch of stuff, and that's going to make me feel better. So, but what that does is step me away from what really needed to happen first.
Mm-hmm.
I will reach for food. We'll reach for shopping. We'll reach for righteous rage, which is not effective rage. Righteous rage is the activism gone wrong. It's
Mm-hmm.
the angry activist, which is really ineffective for creating lasting change. It feels good in the moment because you don't actually have to feel the sorrow. It's not effective. So simple things like even scrolling more and reading more about it and getting more ramped up about it is a way from actually as a way of stepping away from doing the processing, because you're staying up in your head. Let me look for some more evidence. Let me read some more terrible articles and look at some more terrible pictures, and not actually do the work of dropping in and
And
breathing.
it can also be, right, let me keep myself busy with tasks that aren't even related to this,
Yeah.
right? So let me like
Yes.
dive into my business and consume myself with like busy work, or consume myself
Yes.
with the
Of
next
course.
goal,
After
or
years. After,
totally.
yeah. Let me take another course. Let me sign up for another email challenge that I'll never do. Let me sign up for, all of a sudden I need to buy QuickBooks and watch 72 YouTube videos on how to do QuickBooks.
Yep.
Sudden obsession is a great clue that you're avoiding something. And that split, that disconnect of your mind frantically trying to pull you away from something that it thinks is going to kill you, because that's all it is your mind trying to save you. It's not a bad thing. It's a survival mechanism, and we need it. And it really works against us when we've set ourselves on a personal growth path. We don't get to do it that way anymore. It doesn't work anymore. So actually the consequences of addiction become harsher for people who are moving in these energy fields.
And what I just want to name too, so for those of you listening, it's like this could be on the large world scale, right? Where you are feeling the energy of the things that are happening in nature, or you are feeling the things of, the celebrities that are committing suicide or those types of things. And it could also happen on the scale of what's happening in your immediate world, right? So we do this on multiple different levels, and the way to work the energy is also the same.
It's exactly the same. And you won't see it in the external world if you don't have it in your internal world. So it's that old cliche of you spot it, you got it.
I
If
love
you
that.
spot it, you have it within you. Otherwise, and the indicator for that is, am I having an emotional reaction to it? If I'm having an emotional reaction to Anthony Bourdain's death, that's something for me. If I'm having, because I didn't have an emotional reaction to Kate Spade's death. Same thing. Two celebrities committing suicide. One of them, I was like, damn, that's terrible. And the other was like, oh my God, I'm devastated now. And so I had to look and pick apart all the reasons, like, how come his death shattered me and the other one didn't? And then when I got to digging, like, suicide rates are increasing. And I totally believe a piece of that is that we haven't been taught how to handle intensity and how to create meaning on purpose in our world. So we're left vulnerable to being shaken around by what's happening inside and outside. And it is exactly true. It happens on a micro level that your internal structures start to fall apart. And then when you look outside of you and see the external structures falling apart too, it can be pretty overwhelming.
Yeah. And what I want to say is one of the things that was triggering me so much was this way that so many people were then like taking that stand for like the cause, right? And like wanting to reach out to then help people that are in that mental state or in that emotional state. And what was really coming forward for me, and I've sat with this, I sat with the frustration and the anger and like kind of went into it. So the same thing you did with your grief, I did with my anger. And like what I noticed was this way that actually what's needed is for everybody to freaking do their work.
Yes.
Like you want to help someone heal. Like you want to help someone that is on an emotional breakdown or is feeling like their life is falling apart. You want to help them heal, turn towards yourself.
Yeah, because you're not really available to help them if you're busy in the would you stop doing that so I don't have to hurt thing,
I'm uncomfortable
which nobody
with
wants to admit.
Your
yes, nobody wants to own that one. Like, I'm so genuine. I want to help you and I want to save you because you're messing up my day here with your stinking emotions.
So this could happen. I'm sure everybody has a level of this even in their own home, whether it's their children or their husband or their mom or their sister or whatever. So can you talk a little bit? Totally. My dog this morning, like she wanted to go for a walk and I'm like, I didn't even have my shoes on yet. And she was in my space. And finally I just closed the bedroom door. Like,
that's a perfect example.
That's
what we're doing.
Of the door.
Yes. Well, that's what we're doing. When you see those sudden floods of things on Facebook, we're shutting our bedroom door. We're doing something that makes us feel better because we feel like we did a thing and we're not looking at how come I'm so upset by this. People kill themselves every day. And the rates are escalating. And among veterans and LGBT teenagers, it's extremely high. So, but we don't want to feel the yuck of that. So we're going to share the suicide hotline number 700 times or 1,000 times or whatever. Not that that's wrong, but it doesn't address the core of the problem, which is you need to figure out why this is making you so uncomfortable and breathe right there in your cubicle at work. If you have to go to the bathroom and hide and cry and grieve, that's fine. Or you have to go sit in your car, or you have to take a walk somewhere to get away from everybody so that you can
Mm-hmm.
feel into what needs to be processed for you next, because there's always another layer. When we don't shut our bedroom door and we deal with the the dog's being a pain, shut the bedroom door. We're talking metaphors, people try to keep up. So when
But like,
we
okay,
need to
so say, your husband gets home from work and he's angry. And so then you're super uncomfortable with his anger. And so then you're going into people
yes,
please mode to like see like what can I do to not make him angry? Or your child's
yes,
depressed, right? With school and not
yeah,
fitting in. And then that starts to make you feel super uncomfortable. So then you're like, oh my God, what can I do to make her
yes,
more happy? And so these are
right,
real situations, right? That happen in
yes,
people's homes.
absolutely,
So if
yeah,
somebody's noticing this, and probably everybody listening has a layer of something. I mean, if you don't, please
right.
let us know. We want to know the secret.
Yeah, I don't know why you'd be listening this long. Then you
So,
were already like kicked off to some other thing. If you're still here,
yeah.
this is important.
It's easy to like make it about the other person, right? Or to make it about the world event, or the world needs to change, or, something
Yeah.
outside of me needs to change. But okay,
Yes.
so can you say a little bit about like what actually needs to happen and what are the steps?
In those moments, if you're on a path like this where you are starting to watch yourself and get to know your energy when there's nobody around, so that you can feel it in the early stages when your husband comes home angry or your child brings home a disastrous report card, you can feel the agitation start. And the very first thing to ask is, what is this for me? Like, to notice, I guess, would be the very first step, to notice that you're becoming agitated. There's some sort of disruption in there's a glitch in your matrix, something's activating for you. And to identify that, oh, something's activating for me here. What is it? And what do I need to do? And can I stay right here with the angry husband at the dinner table, or do I need to go shut my bedroom door and process this, or take a walk or something?
Mm-hmm.
And after the identification, start the breath. Deep breaths into the agitation, which sounds ridiculous if you've never done the work before. But honestly, taking a deep breath and just saying to yourself, oh, I see you. Disruption in my system. I see you. I feel that I don't want to feel this. Just naming it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel agitated. Naming that. You might not be able to put a word on it. And it's often better to not try to put a word on it. And then immediately you can put a hand on your stomach in the beginning. I find that really helpful, to just remember, like, okay, I'm breathing into and making space for whatever this stream of energy is. I've slipped into a current of this giant river of energy. It's just energy. And asking the questions then, like, what needs to happen here? What do I need to feel? Where is it in my body? You can even put a hand on the place where you feel it in your body, to just, so that you're meeting it. You're not running away from it then. And we're going to be clumsy at this in the beginning. And maybe you can only hold it for 30 seconds before you start to lash out or slip into your own depression, or, reach for the pizza box or whatever it is. But that's the power. The power is right there in that moment, to identify you're feeling agitated, name it that you don't, but you'd rather not be feeling agitated, and
Mm-hmm.
then start to breathe into it. And the next step and the next step and the next step will every single time reveal itself when you're breathing into it and being willing,
Mm-hmm.
curious and willing.
Yes. So powerful.
there's multiple reasons why. You had mentioned before we started some upper limit stuff. And I do want to address that, because that is a way when things are going really well for us, the more love and success and things like that that we're having, the more our unintegrated parts, our shadow selves, our um, floating chunks of things that are just not need to be processed, so they're not integrated, the more those things come up. And we can use sidestepping as a way of not up leveling. We can
Mhm.
use it as a way to not move through our upper limit. And our upper limit is, we only have so much ability to tolerate happiness. When
Mhm.
things are going really well, we find out real quick just how much happiness we are able to hold, because we'll shut it down through all these other things that we already talked about. So wanting to save the world can be a way of making sure that you don't get any more love and success than what you already have. When terrible things are happening and you're having a great time in your life, you can feel guilt about that, which is it's normal, and it's not serving yourself or
Mhm.
the whole.
I know for myself, I'm super sensitive and empathic, and there
Yeah.
have been times when I've almost used that as a in victim mode, right? Like,
Yes,
all this
absolutely.
stuff
Yes,
is
I love to do
happening in
that
the
too.
world and I'm freaking depressed and I can't move forward in
Uh-huh.
my business because of this. I'm not feeling creative.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling inspired. I feel like I want to hide
Right.
under the covers, right?
Yes. That's where a daily practice really saves our butts. Like, if we have a daily practice of checking in for 5 to 15 minutes of meditation every day, um, that helps us catch that stuff, and we train ourselves to handle it long enough that we can ask the questions like, is this something I need to process, or is this something I'm using as a reason to not grow? Especially in
Mhm.
the worlds that we move in, with business owners and coaches and therapists and people like that, helpers, other helpers. There can be a real backlash when somebody gets successful, and we feel that. And we feel other people's discomfort when they are struggling and we're having a great month
And
or whatever.
what I just want to name as well, and I mean, the
Hmm.
celebrities, last week, that's a fabulous
Yeah,
example of this as well, is just because someone has that external success and because they have
right.
an appearance that's happening, sometimes it takes so much energy just to hold that success and that appearance because we are
Yes,
actually um suppressing something deeper. Like that takes so
absolutely.
much energy. Like I remember one of the things when I started learning to trust my intuition, I remember a class that I took. It was a mind body healing class, and it was saying it takes so much energy to suppress your intuition,
Yes. Oh my God.
like so much, right? So then we need like bigger goals. We need
Yes.
bigger task, right? Like we need more weight to
Mhm.
hold
Yeah. Yeah.
too.
And yeah, absolutely. And you can't outrun yourself.
So it's
Like,
it's it's
no,
not a
yeah,
comparison game of like, so
no,
if you're on
God.
one side of the seesaw where you're having a hard time bringing in a little bit money or um
Yeah,
motivating yourself to actually follow a diet plan or whatever the thing is for
right,
you, like
right.
it's apples and oranges. Like you really can't look at the people that are killing it and say like, oh well, they have something I don't have, because in the end, if we really look inside, we're all made up of gifts and shadow, and so they have shadow just like everyone
Yeah,
else too.
absolutely. I really do. I don't come down on a hard position very often. It's one of my strengths and one of my weaknesses, is that it's really hard for me to take a firm position on any one thing because I see all the things. But something I always take a firm position on is we are all one. I truly believe that.
Hmm.
We're all living our what looks like a fragmented life. And pain is pain is pain. We all suffer. We all hurt. And there's no competition there. That's another thing that exploded on Facebook, is people competing, like, well, I'm more depressed than you, or I survived suicide and so I'm allowed to speak about it. You're just depressed and so that doesn't count, like
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff. And it's like, no, we are all tiny divisions of a larger force. And when we lose sight of that and we can't run away from that, that's when a lot of times people will choose suicide, because they have hit that point, but I've got the money and I'm successful and everyone loves me, and it's still not enough.
Mm-hmm. There's still a separation. There's like, no
That
matter what I do,
loneliness,
I still feel
yes,
so separated.
still feel alone. I still can't feel good. And then it becomes even harder, because people have this perception of you as this successful whatever, and so it's even harder then to come forward and say, I actually feel like dying.
Mm-hmm.
People don't listen to you. They dismiss you. But you're rich, so what have you got to worry about? This happens to beautiful women a lot. But you're beautiful. What do you have to feel sorry about?
Totally.
How dare you have low self-esteem? Look at you. And it's like, it's not anything external. Nothing in the outer world is about what it's really about, other than it's the information for you about what you need to do on the inside. We can't see inside, we can see outside. So find the thing that hurts you on the outside and then take that information and go inside
Mm-hmm.
and breathe.
Yeah. And so if you're looking at someone who's making 7 figures and you notice that triggers the F out of you, like
Right.
instead of creating the separation, right? Like you could
Yes.
actually say, like, what about this is really triggering me, and where is that part in me that feels really triggered? And when we're
Yes.
including that part of ourself, we're
Yeah.
then including them. We can have compassion with them too,
Yes.
because we're having compassion for ourselves.
Exactly. That we learn the best from the people that trigger us the most. That's what we do for each other, is we fuck with each other. We
Mm-hmm.
trigger each other. It's the only way we have to see ourselves. It's there's sociology theories out there that people who like knowledge stuff can go Google the looking glass self or things like that. But it's human nature. It's why we have stories, and it's why all our ancient texts point to this same thing. You have to go inside. It's not about, don't shoot the messenger, is what Michael Brown says in this book, The Presence Process, that the trigger is the messenger. Don't even care about the trigger. Don't shoot the messenger. Contemplate the message, the
Mm,
trigger itself.
I love that.
I do too. It's one of my favorites.
Do you want to maybe say a little bit about stories? We don't have to go like super deep into it, but I feel like this,
Sure.
um, it's important, right? Because when we do start to
It's everything, yeah.
build our awareness of these places in ourselves that are like crunchy or triggered or
Yes.
scared or hiding,
Yeah.
that's whenever then the stories come forward.
Yeah. And the stories are just the way that our mind makes sense of the world. And the thing about stories is they're usually wrong because we only have our two little eyes and our one little pea brain to make stories with. And we have to do that to stay sane. We learn that as kids. You knock some stuff off a shelf and your parents respond very negatively to that. You form a belief, don't knock stuff off of shelves, or don't make a mistake, or
Mhm.
my parents hate me. Like, it depends
If I
on,
make
there's
a
so many
mistake, people
variables.
will hate me.
Yeah. Yeah, or they'll get mad at me, and that's scary. So I'm going to move through life never knocking anything off a shelf, which is impossible to
Hmm.
do. And at some point in your life, all that stuff starts to fall apart. But the first step in awakening is you start to hear those stories and they all start to fall apart. And you're like, why do I think that I'm going to die if I make a mistake? Well, because you formed a story with a 4-year-old brain that didn't see the big picture, that your parents were just having a bad day that day. Or maybe your parent had an addiction that had nothing to do with you. And yet, because you were 4, you had to make a story to make sense of the world. Otherwise, you fragment and shatter. So it's not a bad thing again. It's just that when we get to adulthood, the stories that we have formed about the events that have happened to us on the outside, plus when you get to adulthood, you've had 20 or 30 years of looking outside to determine where you are and how to feel and what to do. And then at some point in your life, you have an event, or you just start to wake up and see that we can all see the same event and all have very different interpretations about that. And we get to choose how we interpret. And maybe we want to stop interpreting things the way we were taught to and learn another way to interpret it. Find another way to see things. And we won't ever stop forming opinions or interpreting things. That's what the mind does. But we can stop allowing that to hold the keys to the car.
Yes.
We can just take a look at that. And it's if people want to research it, Byron Katie does great work with it. Rational emotive behavioral therapy is a big mouthful that came before Byron Katie, but it really sets you free to start to look and say, is this how I really want to keep believing the world is?
And
is this how I really want to do it?
What's coming forward also is, I don't know if you want to say anything about mindset work or traditional therapy versus really looking at the stories on an energetic level and working with them on that deeper energetic level. Because I know I've personally done both. And for me, I know energy work is like, it opens so many more doors and portals for me versus just like talking about the story. Because when we're like mentally talking about it, it's actually not what we think it is a lot of times. Like, it's much deeper.
It's not. It's our little story about it.
It's like our story about the story.
Yes, exactly. That's why talk therapy doesn't work. Just mindset alone doesn't work. It's almost like mindset becomes the trigger and the energy work is the answer to the triggers. How I see that. Like so I talk about this as the shit between you and it. And this is what we do in my longer course is you pick a goal on purpose. I want to lose weight. And soon as you pick a goal, you activate all the reasons why you're not sticking to your plan or exercising your body or whatever it is. And then you on purpose are triggering all the stories about why it's not okay to do that. And maybe you don't even want to do that. Maybe the culture has just told you you should be thinner, but actually you're really just fine. But you won't know until you start some affirmations and trigger this process. So just thinking positive lets you know all the reasons why it's so hard for you to think positive. So mindset work really kicks this off. And a lot of people come into spiritual growth through mindset. They know that their thoughts are crap and they want to change them. But then when they go to change them, holding a positive thought becomes even harder. And that's exactly what's supposed to happen. It should get harder because it's letting you know this is between you and love. Love brings up everything unlike itself. So when you're reaching for wholeness and authenticity and feeling positive and feeling more love in your life, everything between you, all the reasons why you don't feel that already get activated so that you can look at them.
I so love that you brought up the heart, and love, because that really is probably the biggest difference, right? Like it was making me think, even I know when I started, my path and I started working on my mindset and I was doing like more high vibe spiritual practice, right? Which is where a lot of times we start. And so I was changing how I was thinking. And then when those people come into your life that aren't positive or are angry or whatever, you're like, you're wrong. I'm not going to talk to you
Yes, get away from me. I'm
because
busy trying
like
to think positive.
contagious, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yes. Get away from me, you leper. You're going to contaminate me with your
Or the world process, right? I'm happy. I'm in my
Yes.
bubble. So like nature's
Right.
doing this thing and it's kind of like messing up my bubble. Um,
Right.
because it rained for 5 days.
Yeah, or the volcano's exploding and everybody's suffering. I don't want to know about it.
Yeah. So it's like when we include the heart and when we use, I feel like when we talk about, gosh, we could probably keep this conversation going forever, but
Days.
I'll try to wrap it up. Um, what it's making me think of is even like the heart-centered coaches or approach, like we can get so in our mind even about being in our heart. And
Yeah.
one of the only ways to truly be in your heart is to have full experiences, right?
Yes.
And
Being in the
that's
heart is a messy.
that's what energy heal, like when you're doing the deep energy practices, which usually you have to be facilitated, um,
Yeah.
you get to then open your heart in a totally new way.
Yeah. It's hard. It's why when we see those pictures of crying children, it activates us so terribly. More so for women, I think, but it's activating men too, um, because it drives us right for the heart. And we
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of stuff between us and our heart. So it's forcing us, if we let it, it will force us to bubble up all that stuff that keeps us from loving the customs, the border patrol officers, as well as the children that they're hurting.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, and at the greatest level of heart, we love them both the same. We love that this person is doing what we label as wrong because our stories are not matching, right? Some people are very high approval for what the Border Patrol is doing. They're
Mm-hmm.
happy that they're doing it because they see it as a solution. And others of us are like, what are you doing? How could you be so cruel? And when you go to the heart, all the stories fall away and you see that everyone's doing the best they can with what they have right now. And
Mm-hmm.
the more love we can open up to in ourselves, which is a highly uncomfortable process that we're real resistant to, what better thing can we offer people who are hurting than a space of love to feel all their feelings in?
Mm-hmm.
We can't offer that if we're not willing to go into our heart space and be intimate with ourselves. We can't be intimate with the world.
Yes.
And heart makes no judgment. That's why I say God is impersonal, because God doesn't place judgments in stories. We do that.
Mm-hmm.
Heart doesn't place judgment in stories. Heart never says you're wrong. Heart says, oh, you're hurting. Let me open into this gentle space and offer that out to every Border Patrol office that might be energetically the least bit willing to stop a moment and say, wait a minute, I don't want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Or not. The heart doesn't invest in an outcome either.
Right.
It just offers love. It's like air. Everybody gets to breathe air. Regardless of my opinion of you or Trump or anybody else, everybody gets to breathe it. Air is just air. It's there for everyone. Plants get to breathe it. Everybody gets to breathe it.
And we don't
And
make
love
it
is the
wrong
same.
whenever it's blowing. We don't make it wrong whenever it's
We
still.
don't fight. We might complain about the weather, but we don't for a moment think we can possibly change it.
Right.
It's the same. And all the time we spend complaining about it is wasted time. So you can complain about it and go, yeah, crap, it's raining for the 5th day in a row. Okay, I guess I better wash the dishes. And you can just move right on.
Mm-hmm.
If we did that with energy and emotion, oh my gosh, this terrible thing just happened and it's triggering me. Let me sit and breathe and open in my heart and make space for myself and then feel what needs to happen next. If anything, what needs to happen next might be washing the dishes, or it might be something larger. We can get
Mm.
caught up in that too. I need to do something on a grand scale. Maybe I need to do the laundry and wait and love more. So,
Yes. So much goodness. Yes, thank you. Thank you for having this
yeah,
conversation, for being
thank you.
willing
It felt really
to
good.
bring this forward. And do you want to let people know again, if they're wanting to connect with you, how they can do that?
Yeah. It's so my website is thatmichellewolff.com, 2 L's, 2 F's. And I'm overly active on Facebook, so you can find me there too. Facebook.com/Michelle Wolff 11. I'm Michelle Wolff 11 on everything: Instagram, Twitter, all those things. And I also offer a free mini session. People can book that on the website, and that's about 30 minutes of bring an issue if it's up for you. And we'll talk about it. You can do a lot in 30 minutes. I had someone call last night and we knocked it out of the park in 20 minutes
Mm.
because there's ways to get real fast about this. It doesn't take forever like therapy can.
Mm-hmm.
It can very fast. Not easy, but fast.
Yes.
So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you're wanting to join in the conversation, so if things are moving through you as you've listened to this, if you have questions, um, I'm intending for each of these conversations to be somewhat of an activation. So even just from listening, you may notice it's starting to bring things forward for you in your own life, in your own awareness. So I invite you to use the Soul Inspired Success community as a safe space for you to share with us what's moving through you or ask questions. And Michelle's a member of that community as well. So if you have questions
Sure.
for her, that's a great place to ask them as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being willing. I love you so much.
I love you too.
All right. Until next time.
Bye.